Wow. Look at this. 79% in an average of polls. That is the highest disapproval rating for any president on record. Joe Biden wasn't liked on gas prices, but he only reached 72%. Barack Obama wasn't well liked back in 2011, but he only reached 68%. Even George W. Bush back in 2006, he reached 75%. I remember the gas prices being quite high back then, but he only reached 75%. Donald Trump takes the cake as these $4 plus gas prices continue to give us pain at the pump. The American people are taking their anger out on the President of the United States.
So that's the broad number. What about when you break this down by party?
Yeah, what happens when you break it down by party? Well, you don't get to 79% just by Democrats hating you, President Trump. You get to it by the fact that we see it across the board. Look at this. Yeah, wow again. 96% of Democrats, 85% of independents, and even a majority of Republicans, 52%, that loyal Republican base who has been through thick and thin with Donald John Trump, even they have turned against the President of the United States on gas prices. You get the rare trifecta, and in the case of President Trump, a very painful trifecta indeed.
So let's break this down, if we could, then by voters, and I'm thinking specifically working class voters. This is a group that really broke well for President Trump. How is his approval with them right now?
Yeah, I think a lot of them are having some regrets, at least when it comes to gas prices, right? President Trump, historically strong for Republican president, Republican candidate, among the working class, among those making less than $50,000. But look at these numbers. Disapprove of Trump on gas prices. Oh, look at this. 86%. 86. I mean, what is that? We're talking about more than 6 and 7. I don't even know when we get the fractions that high. My goodness gracious. Among Republicans, we're talking, look at this. We're talking 2 in 3 Republicans, 2 in 3 Republicans, independents, 90%, Democrats, 93%. I mean, you just don't ever see numbers like these. These are just atrocious numbers among the working class, a trifecta indeed, and a very clear trifecta of the working class turning against President Trump, regardless of party identification. Their map to take back a majority runs through the South. What are we talking about? Why don't we talk about Georgia? Look at this. Jon Ossoff up by 13 points. How about Roy Cooper, the former governor, up 9 points? And then James Tallarico holding on to that lead in the great state of Texas down there in the South, 2 points. So 3 southern states, 3 former Confederate states, and you see that Democrats are leading in them all. There has not been a Senate Democratic win in North Carolina since 2008. And in Texas, you have to go all the way back since 1988. So it could, in fact, be a historic year for Democrats in these 3 southern states.
You just gave us some sense of how unusual it is for those 2 states. But what would it look like if all 3 of the Democrats were to win in those 3 states? How unusual is that?
Yeah, how unusual it is. They're ahead in these 3. They're also heavily favored in the great state of Virginia. So in the 2000s midterm Senate races, we're looking at something historic potentially here, Sarah Seidner. They're up right now in 4 states. The most Dem wins in a year in the former Confederacy in a midterm in the 2000s this century is only 2. They could potentially win double the amount of races than they have in any midterm cycle this entire century in the southern United States when you add together Georgia, North Carolina, Texas, and the great Commonwealth of Virginia.
All right, so who is it? What group is it, or is there just one group that's helping to push Democrats into this unusual position in those states?
Yeah, what it is it's white college voters. We have seen that group move from the Republican column, shifting towards the Democratic column. And just look at these numbers here. Margin among white college voters. In 2016, when Trump won his first term, look at this. In the presidential race, it was 19 points in North Carolina. Look at where the polling is now. You have Roy Cooper up by 13 points. That's a 30-point shift. How about in Texas? Trump won it by 31. Now it's just a 1-point lead. In Georgia, it was 41 points. Now, what are we talking about? We're seeing that Jon Ossoff's only down by 13. We're talking about a 31-point shift on average among white college voters. They are driving this. And when you put it all together, Sarah Seidner, and we look at the entire map, and we look at the casualty prediction market, look at this. Chance to win the United States Senate in 2026. The odds are moving in the Democrats' direction. Republicans were a 56% chance a month ago. Now it's basically dead even, 51% chance to 49% chance. So Democrats very much in the game because of these southern races. And as I said at the beginning of this, the prediction markets also predict a 100% chance that, in fact, you will be calling me after this show.
How do voters feel about the president's work on jobs? jobs.
You know, these are the types of numbers that will make a lot of Republican members of Congress lose their jobs come November. You can see it right here. I mean, just look at this trend line. Trump's net approval rating on jobs. He is now 22 points underwater, swimming with the fishes, a very unlucky 22 points. That is way down from where he was at the beginning of term number 2, where he was at plus 9 points. And the whole other thing is this was such a big strength for President Trump in term number 1. He was 10 points above water at this point in term number 1. So we're talking about a 32-point decline in terms of Trump's net approval rating on jobs. It is not just inflation that is hurting Trump when it comes to the economy and the Americans' voters' minds. It is jobs as well.
This is just a huge swing.
This is a
huge swing on a foundational issue that he ran on. How do people feel in general about the jobs market right now?
Great question, Johnny B. And I think that this really gives the game away. I mean, just look at this. On jobs and employment, we're on the wrong track, the right track. Back at the beginning of Trump's second term, the plurality set on the right track. That ain't the case no more. I'll tell you this much. Look at that. That right track number has fallen significantly, down 11 points now to 29%. And that wrong track number, which was behind that right track, is now running ahead of it. Look at that number, up nearly 20 points now. The majority of Americans say that the country is on the wrong track when it comes to jobs and employment. No wonder President Trump's numbers are so poor at this point.
And again, this gets to how people feel.
Yes.
You can't tell people how they feel. This is a matter of feelings and sentiment.
This is feelings and sentiment, and you know what? That's the name of the game in politics.
How do people feel about getting a job in general right now?
I think what is driving this? What is driving this right track, this wrong track number to rocket on up? Well, I'll tell you what's causing it to rocket on up. Look at this. Okay, good or bad time to find a quality job. You go back just before the beginning of Trump's second term in office, the plurality, 48% said a good time. Now you had 45% saying a bad time, just running slightly behind that good time. But look at this, that bad number, again, up like a rocket. We're talking about 63% at the beginning of Q2 in 2026. And that good number, way down into the basement, now just 33%. It's a 30-point advantage and a bad advantage when it comes to finding a quality job.
And again, you're dealing with sentiment here, how people feel, which is harder to get them to change.
Correct.
What are the prediction markets then saying about whether or not there'll be, more big layoffs in some sectors like the tech sector?
Yeah, I mean, just take a look at this. This is what it is. Change 2026 tech layoffs exceed 2025. 92% chance, according to the Kalshi prediction market. These are the types of numbers that political nightmares are made of, and it is very difficult to change voter sentiment when it seems to be so locked in this. On the negative side, you put that together with voter sentiment on inflation, that is a recipe for disaster for Republicans running in the midterm elections.
And they're running out of time. Harry, and thank you very much for that.
Thank you, my friend. Abdul al-Sayed is in trouble in Michigan. Take a look here. Michigan Senate, Rogers versus El-Sayed. Look at this, a new Fox News poll. Rogers is actually up by 4 points. He's up by 4 points. It's close, but a Republican is ahead in Michigan. And why? Why? What is going on? Look among independents. Rogers actually leads by 5. This is extremely unusual because across the political map, as I was looking at these different Fox News polls, I couldn't find another example where the Republican was actually leading among independents. And it turns out that candidate quality may in fact matter, at least in terms of how voters see it, because in this same poll, the Democratic candidate for governor was ahead. So this is unique to the Senate race, and it is quite a troubling result for Democrats and quite a heartening one for Republicans.
So do you have a sense then, Harry, of what it is that is contributing to the struggles, right, that Abdul al-Sayed is? Is it that Rogers is a stronger candidate, or is it that El-Sayed has more issues for voters to deal with?
It is all about Abdul al-Sayed. He is a weak candidate, at least by the metrics that we normally look at. And you can just take a look here. Okay, the net favorability rating of the Dem Senate candidates across these northern battlegrounds. You'll notice there's only one candidate, Ren, one who has an unfavorable rating higher than his favorable rating, and it is significantly higher. Look how far underwater Abdul al-Sayed is. He is 13 points underwater, under there Lake Michigan. My goodness gracious. Troy Jackson in Maine, he's at +1. You got Sherrod Brown at +4 in Ohio, and Josh Turek in Iowa way above there at +18 points. This is extremely unusual. Again, across the map, Democrats have done such a good job recruiting candidates who are well-liked by the voters. Again, I looked at all the Fox News polls. All the Democrats were above water except for Abdul al-Sayed, and he is 13 points underwater. This is all about Abdul al-Sayed being a weak candidate, at least in the minds of the voters.
And so then just putting that in perspective, too, in the state of Michigan, this is, I mean, you touched on this, right? But this is especially important when you look at things in the state of Michigan.
Yeah, okay. So you look at this first slide, right? You see that Mike Rogers is ahead, right, by 4 points. Well, I was interested because I couldn't think of another example where you actually had a Democratic candidate who was down at least 4 points. 4 points in a Senate poll in Michigan. And it turns out for this entire century, Abdul el-Sayed is the only one in a poll that meets CNN standards for publication. This is extremely, extremely, extremely unusual. Abdul el-Sayed breaking records in the ways that you don't want to. In fact, he is the first Democrat down by this much, as I said, in a century since 1994. Now, I will note, obviously, we have a campaign to go, and I think there are different ways you can look at this metric, right, this race. And I will say it's a snapshot in time. Michigan Senate chances, according to the Kalshi prediction market, look, Abdul el-Sayed's chances have fallen, but he still has a better chance than not of winning this race. But again, this is a real potential lifeline for Republicans who want to maintain control of the United States Senate. Simply put, Michigan being in play, a big deal and extremely unusual. Abdul el-Sayed making it so with his historic unpopularity in the great state of Michigan. I think this could very well be a historic year for black gubernatorial candidates, and it starts off in the South. Just take a look here. Okay. Hello. Okay. Gov races, general election polls. Byron Donalds, who's a heavy favorite to be the Republican nominee in Florida, he's up by 5 points over his likely Democratic opponent. You come to Georgia, Keisha Lance Bottoms, get this, she's up by 5 points. So it's happening across the aisle at this point. You got a Republican in Florida, a Democrat in the great state of Georgia, the Peach State, both at this point leading in the polls, favored to be the next governors of two former Confederate states. That would be historic, making neither state has ever had a black governor before.
So that would be key. There are also other races you're keeping an eye on that are perhaps not as well known, if you will, across the country, and there's not as much polling in these races, but you're seeing some movement there.
Yeah, you know, you mentioned Wisconsin, you mentioned David Crowley. I mean, just look at these. Okay, how about two other states? Current Gov race forecast ratings. In Wisconsin, Crowley is the favorite. That race is definitely leaning Dem at this point. Wisconsin has never had a black governor. Then in the great state of Maryland, Wes Moore is running for re-election. He is a very heavy favorite to win there. So you're seeing it. You're seeing in the South, you're seeing in the border states like Maryland, and you're seeing in the Midwest as well. You're talking about four candidates who at this point look more likely than not to be the next governors of their state. In the case of Wes Moore, win re-election. You're seeing it across the political map.
Seeing it across, this is, I mean, you mentioned some of the potential history that could be made, but writ large, this would be quite a year.
Yeah, this would be quite a year. So you add up Wes Moore, you add up Crowley, you add up Byron Donalds, you add up Keisha Lance Bottoms. Just look at this. I mean, this really says it. Elected black governors. In the former column, there's only two. There's one, there's two, right? You have one from Virginia, you have one from Massachusetts and Deval Patrick, right? And then in 2026, there are four. You are literally getting double the number of former elected black governors who could be elected this year. And then there are two more in Nevada and Michigan who are underdogs but have a legitimate shot of winning. So what we're talking about is, you know, we're always talking about getting more diversity in our political system, allowing African Americans to be a full part of this country. And now in the gubernatorial column, we might actually start trying to reach towards that goal. So you got Aaron Ford, you got John James, who are the two underdogs. And in the favorites here, again, you have Keisha Lance Bottoms, you have David Crowley, you have Wes Moore, and you have Byron Donalds. So it's just something that is happening across the political map, a year in which we could finally see history actually being made. Absolutely. Can we catch a break here? Look at this. Polls over state lefties in Dem primaries. You know, last week it was 10 points. You think 10 points is a lot? How about 20 points in Wisconsin? Now, I will note that in this case, Wisconsin had some light candidate switches, candidates coming out, candidates leaving the race. I was suspect after what happened in Michigan that the polling that showed Francesca Hong up by about 20 points was actually going to come to fruition. But it did happen again. The polls overstated the lefties in Wisconsin, just like they did in another Great Lake battleground state of Michigan.
Okay. What are some of the possible reasons why these polls are ultimately overstating the support that they get on Election Day?
Yeah, if this were just about, the fact that the polls overestimated the two lefties, that would be one thing. But I think that this may speak to something bigger, which is the polling may be having too many of those young progressives. And what am I talking about? Well, just take a look here. Who won the 5 counties with the most under the age of 40? That is 18 to 39. In the Michigan Senate, it was Abdul el-Sayed. He won to a 5. How about in Wisconsin governor? The exact same thing. In the youngest counties, that is where these lefties did the best. And so when you kind of look at the polling, you go, hey, wait a minute, maybe these polls had too many younger folks in them. And I think that speaks to something larger potentially, which is all these pollings, which is showing progressivism on the left, the far left rising, seeing democratic socialism, especially in the case of Wisconsin, rising. You got to look at these results and say, hey, wait a minute, maybe, Johnny, maybe these polls are overestimating how much that democratic socialism is rising within the Democratic Party, because in two key statewide races in a row, what we've seen is the lefties being vastly overestimated, and in the case of Wisconsin, the Democratic Socialists being vastly overestimated by 20 points.
If you oversample among young people, one of the things that can happen is young people don't vote as much.
Yes.
And then you can skew the ultimate results there.
Correct. And I think that means so much as we're looking at these polls and what the actual implications are in terms of how big the left rise is.
And the other thing that may have happened in Wisconsin, especially in Wisconsin, is that people who hadn't decided may have decided late, or they may have changed their minds because of a lot of the things that people were talking about just in the last few weeks with Francesca Hong may not have helped her, like, say, her past positions not digging Thanksgiving.
Yeah, folks, if you're going to run for political office in this country, dare I say you should be pro-Thanksgiving from the beginning of the campaign to the end of the campaign. Enough of the anti-Thanksgiving stuff. And why do I say that? Because just look at this. Americans who think or say that they don't celebrate Thanksgiving, it's just 8%. It's just 8%. To put that into some perspective for you, 10% of Americans say the earth is flat, and 12% of Americans say the moon landing was fake. Don't pick a position or be able to be implied that you picked a position in which less people believe in it than say the moon landing was fake or the earth was flat, Johnny.
And I will note that that was the predominant story about her in the news the last few weeks. Wow. It was hot. So is that going to drive decisions from voters?
You know, I was schwitzing a lot in the month of July, although granted, you know, I schwitz a lot all the time. But the bottom line when it comes to voters is, simply put, they don't care. They don't care. I mean, just look at these numbers. Okay, top issue a midterm vote. You can list up the three issues. The economy, not surprisingly, comes in at number one at 54%. Immigration, 28%. Look where climate change is. It's tied for 14th. Tied for 14th, all the way down here at 3%. Johnny, I'm not the greatest mathematician in the world, but I sure as heck know that 54% is a whole heck of a lot higher than 3%. So despite the climate being so warm in the month of July, the hottest month on record here in the United States of America, the voters simply put do not say that climate change is going to be an issue in which they vote upon in the midterm election.
And how much people are concerned has been changing over time.
Yeah, I mean, this is, I think, the other thing, which is, you know, how much concern is there when it comes over time? And you see this 3% here, and you can see these slides right here. Say climate change is a very big problem. In 2016, it was 40%. It was 40%. Look where we are in 2026. It's 39%. It's 39%. Now, Johnny B., you know, you're talking about change. Where the change we have seen is partisanship, right? And what we can see is Republicans, more so than anybody else, have been shifting away from the idea that climate change is a top issue for them. Take a look at this. The least important issue for Republicans, it's just at 14% in terms of saying that climate change is a very big problem. So we're seeing a large partisan split, but when it comes together, Democrats are going in one direction, Republicans are going in another direction. But when you put those two together, the bottom line is we're only talking about 2 in 5 Americans, both now and 10 years ago, saying that climate change is a very big problem.
This is an all New York accent hit, I'm noticing this time. You're leaning into that.
I'm leaning into it.
Because it was hot in July in New York.
Yes.
So to what extent do people blame, you know, human activity for this?
So you see this 40%, you see this 39%. Now I really am leaning into the New York accent. Say it's humans causing the earth to warm. Look at this. In 2016, it was 45%. Now it's 48%. Again, no real shift that's going on here as opposed to saying there's no warming or it's natural.